Hello, welcome everybody to another live wine and comics pairing show. Let me click over to Instagram and make sure that I click that we are going live there as well, because we actually always have like at least 2 or 3 people kind of join on Instagram. Yeah. It doesn't register here on StreamYard, but it always registers on Instagram, and that is extra views, which I always love. We have a very special guest, as always, with us today, but we will introduce him right after we come back from our grand opening. Here we go, guys. Let's try that again. Nope. Oh, we are so prepared today. There we go. Shit. Okay. Well, I think my internet's a little laggy today as well. I kept clicking that thing and it popped in. Yeah. After I was like, oh, it's not happening. And then it popped in. Anyway, we have very special guest with us today, Kyle Roberts, writer, artist, extraordinaire of Parent Guardian issue number 1. Bam! Right here, great guys, cover. On Kickstarter right now until Friday, April 26th. You have plenty of time. You have 3 more weeks and change to get in on this. We also have this gorgeous alt cover right here based on Hong Kong movie posters of the past, which is near and dear to my heart as well. So I truly appreciated that. All right. Welcome, Kyle.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Of course.
Yeah, I love the concept of this, right? with the wine, I do a monthly newsletter where I often do recipes. So I'll do cocktail recipes, hot sauce recipes. So just trying to always bring something else in with the art, with the comics. So doing this, when I saw, because it was Stephen Prince, so I saw you guys when you first interviewed him, and I'm like, oh. Like I wrote you guys down. I'm like, I gotta hit these guys up when it's time. Like, this is brilliant. I love this idea.
Absolutely.
So, we love to hear that. We welcome to our curious little weirdo corner of the world.
Yeah, it's a curious little weirdo live stream.
And the idea that you guys have like expanding out with not just comics, but doing other things. I think that's brilliant as well. So I'm super excited.
Brilliant. I was just going to say to plug ourselves on that expansion. We are going to be adding a full-on. So the live streams obviously are video. But we will be expanding to a full-blown podcast just called Wine and ... because it will be more than just comics. It'll be movies, TV, books, music, and comics. And we will be having creators on from all those industries to talk about, honestly, whatever they want. So it's not like a music industry person has to talk about an album or a comics creator has to talk about a comic, but they can talk about, like, what's your passion? Come on, let's all talk about it. As a group, and we will of course pair a wine with Wet That Thing. So we will have to do another thing even after the stream where we have you on wine and when that's finally ready soon, coming very, very soon.
Sounds awesome.
And we have some comments right off. We have BMD Nerd. I was on the fence about this comic, but a reasonably priced digital forced my hand. Doesn't it always?
Nice.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, BMD Nerd.
And that alt cover is fire.
Absolutely fire. Yes.
And I think it's literally like, isn't that what is that, like a supernova sun kind of a thing burning it's some like in the background or some explosion like that looks like fire in the background. So yeah, you gotta it is kind of literal.
That cover is poster worthy and shirt worthy.
It is. It's super cool.
I will say that on to that point, BMD Nerd, that when I go to a Kickstarter, when I see something that I'm like, ooh, that looks really curious, and I'm like, I do not need to spend money on another Kickstarter. Stop. So, but I'll go there and I'll click in, and the first thing I do is how much is like before I even look up anything else about the comic, I'm like, is the digital something that I'm not going to choke on, in terms of price? And I look at that, and if not, I'm like, okay, I'm going to read the rest of this campaign page. Yeah. If it's like the digital of this 32-page comic is $12, I'm like, I'm a pass. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to keep going because I really do not need another Kickstarter in my life right now. But in any event, Kyle, it's your first time on the Wine and Comics Pairing Show. You are new to us. So before we get into Parent Guardian and what that is, where that came from, and how we got to a first issue of this, a miniseries. Yes, who is Kyle? Why do you write and draw? And how did you get to do it all in comics? Please, what is your story?
Oh man. Well, who I am, I'm a high school art teacher that
Nice.
has a past in comics. So as a kid, elementary school is when I found comics. Spinner rack at a 7-Eleven, and it just sucked me in. And I had about maybe 2 or 3 years of like intense collecting where I was, buying forward and then buying back issues. So I'm like going in both directions, just amassing this collection. And then like junior high kind of hits, and our local comic shop was in the mall at the King of Prussia Mall. So I would like get on the bus and I would go to the mall to get to the comic store. But by then, everybody's hanging out at the mall, and like became very, and comics weren't cool in 1988, so I had to kind of like give it up for a while. I switched over to novels, specifically like
horror
novels.
To the peer pressure of it all, huh?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
Or a nerd, right? Because novels, you can be a nerd, which is not so bad because you're useful, whereas geek, you're just an outcast at that point.
Pretty much, yeah. Like I was into D&D, but I had no one to play D&D with, so I just had all this stuff, and I just drew pictures and rolled dice by myself. But kept drawing, drew through high school, and in college I ended up, one of my fraternity brothers was good friends with Danny Mickey, who was an inker at Extreme Studios. If there's like a Mount Rushmore of inkers, chances are Danny's face would be on one of them. He was on Batman with Greg Capullo. Like, he's legit. And so I came on as a background inker for him and a few of the other guys that were in the studio at Extreme Studios, so Rob Liefeld's studio. So that was initially in Anaheim, and then we ended up moving to Brea. So I was working there for like 2 years in college, and then, moved on and found other art-related fields until I decided I wanted to become a teacher. Went back to school, got my teaching credentials, started teaching. And then after a couple of years, I had a coworker who is an indie filmmaker. And we got to talking and became friends, and he had a script kind of laying around. He's like, maybe it would be, it's too big for me to produce, because he's like a micro budget producer. But maybe it's a video game, maybe it's a comic. So we adapted it into a comic. It was a 3-issue miniseries. Like, we went all in. Nobody saw it. Like, it, like you think like there's this comics, everybody wants to read comics, and you put it out there and like no one's there for it. And that was like my education. Like, okay, there's more to just making it, like building your audience, and that's when I became more aware of the Kickstarter community and how to like build a campaign. And so
what year was this approximately?
Oh man, like probably 2009, 2010.
All right, the beginning of the Kickstarter community. My goodness.
Yeah, so did the convention scene with that first mini series, made some great friends, kind of got the vibe of what the community's looking for. And then went in. So then I decided, like, because everyone's like, oh, you should really start with short stories. You shouldn't start with a 3-issue series, 100 pages. Like, instead you should, chunk it up. So that's when I decided I was going to do a series of short stories and pull it together as an anthology, because I was really into Tales of the Crypt and eerie, like creepy, those old magazines. Like, I totally dug that vibe. So Parent Guardian was one of those short stories in that first anthology that I kickstarted for my very first Kickstarter. So, and that story was kind of personal. I had a young daughter at the time, and like me trying to. Yeah,
I was going to ask about that. I was like, this is you two, isn't it?
Very much so. Like, my wife is is a marriage and family therapist. So me trying to build, a side art career while at home, like at work, come home, doing that, kind of not being present, not being fully invested at home, and just seeing what I was kind of becoming in that space at home, not liking it. And like that kind of triggered that story. So that was very much, a metaphor for where I was at that point, and kind of like the cautionary tale that it became.
Yeah.
And the bigger story, the one that I'm doing now, came from, so after that was the first one of the 5 stories that I finished, and to get kind of like eyes on what I was doing in my monthly newsletter, I sent it out to get reviewed. And with the review, it's like, here's it's free to download. I just want people to see it, and so I can get them on my email. And in the review, it was a good review overall, like 4 out of 5 stars. But like, he had these criticisms within it where I was like, what are you talking about? Like, and he said something, and it's not published anymore. Like, the website's long gone, but there was some comment within the critique that was like, it's not, we have no sense of like the greater space or the world, like, what is this world there? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, it's
13 pages.
Finite. It is finite. And then like, once I read that and paused, I had like 4 images kind of hit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, like, here she is 10 years later, and he's still there, and he's not there, but like everything,
he's there. Yeah.
He is. So
that was Ghost of the Feast. Yeah.
So
I was gonna say, it's a very active, what Dallas just said, where it's like that literary thing where it's like, the presence of the figure, even though they're gone, is the thing that motivates everyone else in the story and in the book. And here you have it as it's like, it's that concept, but they're actively through the machine still there and actively gumming up all the works.
Right.
Or, one way or the other. Yeah.
So that was like the genesis of it, and it just took a while to get here, deciding to work on other people's projects, and through whatever reasons, like it was opportunity, it was necessity, like all of these things kind of took precedence, and we finally reached the point where I could invest myself back into it, and hopefully continue it beyond just this first issue.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, I will say, so just before I start commenting on the story of what Kyle just said. So Parent Guardian is a sort of, it's sci-fi, interstellar, military, not quite space opera, might be too much of a genre to plug on it. It's not like wide ranging, or at least not quite yet. But it's definitely military. Oh gosh, how to even describe it exactly? And there is a Ghost in the Machine element to it in terms of what is happening here, but it is the future that it takes place in. Is one, it's a spin on something we have seen before in like the Aliens movies, like the Megacore, right? Which is sort of out there, and everyone, so you have kind of a blend between the Megacore of the Aliens movies and the military sci-fi of like Starship Troopers, where you have the Megacore, which is going from planet to planet and strip mining it of resources. You have the workers that they're putting down there, the sort of colonizers, for lack of a better term, that are doing that deed. And then they're also the military side of that, where you have to protect that. And there are rebels in this world, or something. This is where it gets a little like, it hasn't been defined quite yet, either in the short or in issue number 1 yet. Or at least not the parts where we read. There is some of the pages weren't lettered yet, so maybe there's more clarity in the pages we haven't read. But so far, we just know that there is rebellion. I'm pretty sure there are other humans, but it's like, right, because it's a mega, just like how Sigourney Weaver eventually becomes against the Megacore. Like, you are causing all the horrors, to spread and do these things because of your greed. And I think what I really appreciated about that 13-page short story, to push back a little bit, and I totally get what that reviewer was saying, because no, he was right. You weren't filling in those blanks, but one, as you already mentioned, it's 13 pages. You shouldn't, because that just becomes didactic, right? It's like you're just shoehorning in info that it's like, do we need this info? And you don't. Like, the 13 pages are, you're following some of the mechs that are the miners, as well as the military. And this is something I actually do have a question for you, but let me finish what I'm saying right here before I ask it. The mechs, who are also part of, they're the miners and the military and the defense, and they are attacked by a mysterious group of something that are attacking the station that they come from, where all their families are, and they have to somehow defend themselves and the mining operation and get back to the station. And you can already tell, kind of like, and this is why I love the Starship Troopers Aliens comparison, they're all brainwashed like the Starship Trooper commandos, where it's like, this is what you're here to do and this is how you do it, and it's like, don't think, just go and kill. And so they're like, this is what we do, we obey orders, we do not question it. And one guy has to question it because his values are, and this is where I think Kyle's personal experience, where it's like, you have to judge what's most important for yourself and make that call and do that to the best of your ability, even if it goes against whatever the peer pressure side of things are pushing you to do. And that short story is all about that.
100%.
And then, yes, and then Parent Guardian issue #1 that is on Kickstarter right now, you can of course get the short story to go with it as well if you pledge to this Kickstarter. But it actually is, it's a sequel. So it is the
continuation or sequel?
Continuation. But we'll you know, sequels are continuations.
Yeah, we'll go continuation.
Okay. It is a continuation. But you could call it an expansion as well, but it does jump in time. So it is that thing where it's like, okay, that story happened. Now we're jumping in time and taking some of the characters from that and seeing what happened, like what is the fallout of that and where are they now? And then building and expanding upon what you saw of that universe in a larger and grander scale further into the future. So that is the basic setup without revealing anything, without giving anything away, hopefully, of either the short or the single issue. For you, Kyle, what are, like, outside of the personal things that you're trying to explore, I guess when you did the short story and you didn't really have you were like, the world build, like, I know what this, like, what the world is, you had a basic concept of it, but you didn't need to fill in those blanks. It was just a 13-page short story. This is about the characters that are within that. And when you expanded upon that, I guess, what would you say, how did you go about that? Like, where did you want to go? Now that you've explored what you explored in that 13-page short story, what is this larger story meant to explore? What is it meant to be?
So, character-wise, it's about, ultimately, it's about the rebellious teenage daughter understanding her father's overprotectiveness and, the inability to communicate and all of those things, like that wisdom that comes with age, like when we were teenagers, and how our parents seemed to be the enemy, and how we withheld things from them, we actively lied to them, and they were like literally the only people that had our backs and would do anything for us. So ultimately, her journey is going to be understanding and appreciating that. We're not there yet, right? So that's the core of the story. The other things happening around it are, the conflict where we have, a limited resource that people are competing for. So in the short story, it was like pirates and raiders just coming in and snatching and grabbing. In this story, we're going to kind of delve a little bit deeper as to who they are and why they're there, in terms of, it's a lot like, and I don't want to say like cowboys and Indians, but it's very much like the gold rush first, and then the larger corporations then come in, and it's like those people that were there first that built the roads and colonization, settled the towns, like they're all pushed out. So it's going to be that, and uncovering that, and like you said with the megacorp, like the propaganda that they've been spewing, what everyone believes that they work for them, and who's doing the mining versus who's part of kind of like the great military machine that is kind of enforcing all the rules out there with no recourse, right? There's no what they say is law, or what they decide is what is decided. So that's is going to be issue 2, like where all of this will come to light. We just had to get characters
yeah.
in where they needed to get to from where we started.
Yeah. I mean, it's still a very full first issue. Like a
There's
lot
going
happens.
There's,
Yeah.
If
And
you know, if I,
think that
knew,
also-
if I knew I had a long launch pad, you know, like I would have, you know, definitely lengthened. Like, there's a lot going on. You know, I felt like I had to get it in, and if
I think you've done a great job with. I think you've done a great job, Kyle, with the sort of inertia and momentum of these first two issues, because it really just does hit the ground running. And particularly this first full issue, the expansion here, when we pick up with without giving too much away, with the daughter and where she is in her life. Kind of fantastic to kind of just make that jump where, you know, that sort of rubber band is already cocked and ready to go, and the energy is already there. From the first 5 or 6 pages, we know exactly what the dynamic is between this 19-year-old and her quote unquote father. So yeah, you do a great job of and it feels authentic. It doesn't feel forced or hurried in any sense of the word. So
no, it really doesn't. I think it's 35 pages. Yeah, for a first issue, like you took your time with that, like, because that is a nice oversized first issue, and it has, from what I can tell, again, like the last third of the issue is something that we got to see the art, but we didn't get the lettering on it. So it's like, okay, well, that we kind of get to see what happens, but we don't really understand the pacing or what's anything that's revealed via dialogue. But it is not rushed. You gave your, like, that is an oversized first issue. You know, 35 pages of story and art is always going to be like close to a double-sized issue. So it's like it's very meaty. It's well worth everyone's time. I did go to the Kickstarter page and double check real quick what is stated clearly as the basic premise. So we can reveal that the dad's spirit is in the mech. It's right there in like the first paragraph. So I'm like, okay, good. I'm like, I just didn't want to, as long as that's not a reveal at some point. It's like the dad's spirit inhabits this mech and follows her around, and is seemingly because he's a ghost in a machine, like can kind of always know what's happening with her. So he's a little overprotective. He you know, when she wants to hook up with a random dude, he's like, and shows up there. So he is that overbearing as well as overprotective dad, which is where she's not having the chance, where on the one hand, they need to somehow come together to understand what they are to each other, but at the same time, like, he's doing the classic dad thing and she's doing the classic teenage thing, where it is he's not letting her live her life or find out who she is. He's just always there to put a stop to any attempt to explore life on her own. And so that's sort of where the tension between the two is coming in at this point. She refuses to ride him, like, because that's the thing, he like, as a mech, it's like he needs a pilot, and he's like, you're my pilot, and she's like, hell no, never gonna do it. You know, kind of a thing. That's where the issue opens, and you can probably tell what the first issue's journey between the two of them might be, having that just said. But yeah, so when it comes to, first off, let's actually talk about your artistic influences, because, you know, your art, it's wonderfully detailed. You're very good. In this case, in the original short story, you were only the inker and you worked with another penciler. Now, was that, out of curiosity, actually, let's start there. Out of curiosity, what made you go for another artist in that 13-pager?
So with the 5 short stories, so I had written or co-written all of them, and I was illustrating 3 of them, and then trying to get everything to come together and finish at about the same time. I had to kind of farm some stuff out. So with the short story The Bin, which became my Electric Youth series, like, I didn't feel like I drew kids very well, so like we found Rafael Dantas and he did a killer job on that. And then the artist Raphael Romeo Magat I worked with on a previous Kickstarter, the Jill Trent Science Sleuth. So he was one of the illustrators on that, and I thought he did some really cool tech stuff, and so it just kind of worked out. And like, I didn't want it to just be about me, and when I was trying to just have it be me, it was very overwhelming. So it's like, I need some buddies. Like I need some people. And so I felt some ownership because he just did the pencils. So, you know, he sent those digitally. I printed them out and then I inked them. So I see me in the inks. So I do feel some ownership on the art, and then of course writing it and then lettering it all myself too.
Yeah.
Right.
Like I didn't mind, you know, having, you know, his hand as, you know. So yeah, that just happened.
And so for you, when it comes to, I mean, I suppose we don't have to stick to comics, but just looking at your art style, and when we go look at the Kickstarter page, guys, we'll look at some sample pages and whatnot, and you'll get to see Kyle's art a little more in detail, not just us talking about it. But you have a beautiful one. You're plainly both an amazing penciler and inker, because your art is very detailed, but you separate it really well. There's never, even in the black and white pages we saw, there's never any issue with understanding what we're looking at, even though there's a crazy number of lines on every panel, let alone page. Like you have a dense style that is also has this wonderful dynamic, like dynamism. Is that a word? I'm gonna go with it. Dynamism. Okay, perfect. I hesitated. I was like, I think I'm making that up. But it has a fluidness to it. It has a sense of motion always, even though there's so much. A lot of the times when the artists that have a ton of detail, things can get very heavy and very almost like you're carving something out of stone. Like it gets that, you know, heavy and very detailed, but it's like wood carving. It's chiseled. It's like, so it gets kind of stiff a little bit, even though you don't mind because of all the detail. But in yours, you have all this detail and all this motion going on at all times. So your artistic influences, what are they? I'm very curious.
So it's almost all comics, but
okay.
Like John Buscema is like my number one guy. So when I started collecting comics, he was the illustrator on the Avengers. So and he was the illustrator like How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. So it was like having that book, you know, in 6th grade and reading the Avengers plus reading his Conan books. Like he very much imprinted on me that entire like 70s fantasy vibe, like Frank Frazetta and, you know, everyone that was part of the studio, William Kaluta. I'm drawing blanks now. Like usually I can just rattle them all off, but that whole group of, you know, artists very much imprinted on me when I was young. And in terms of like stylistically, like my line quality, there was a comic, Grendel by Matt Wagner.
Yes.
So the Christine Spar saga was drawn by the Panda Brothers.
Panda Bros,
and they had like a very 80s kind of fashion art kind of style. So it was like quasi anime influence, but also had like this fashion industry lucis and like those heavy lines and the tapered,
very angular too, crazy angular. Yeah.
So that, you know, that kind of imprinted on me. And then of course, you know, working at Extreme Studios for 2 years and trying to adapt to their house style of what like the 90s inking style was. Elements of that still remain. So it's kind of like this conglomeration of then, you know, like just my traditional drawing classes, figure drawing classes, life drawing classes, like all of that, you know, compounds.
Right.
And what you see is just that, you know, after, you know, 40 some odd years of drawing, this is where I'm at currently, stylistically.
Excuse me, it works. Don't change.
Yeah, I can see all those influences. I mean, Kaluta, especially now that you mentioned him, I'm like, oh yeah, 100%. Panda Bros. Now that you mentioned it, even they got more fluid as they went on. Later in their years, like I've read some of their Dark Horse stuff post Grendel, when it's just them. It's just like, you know, they're the creators on it, and like their stuff got much looser than their work on Grendel and whatnot. And now that you mentioned it, I'm like, ooh, I can see a lot of your current style into kind of where their style evolved into as well. So yeah, 100%. For this story in particular, what do you think you are pulling from, like, sci-fi wise? What are your sci-fi greats? What are top tier for you?
Good question.
So definitely Aliens, like that's for sure up there. Dune, very much so.
Have you seen the 2 movies?
Of course, very much so.
Of course.
Yes. I enjoyed them very much. I appreciated the liberties that it took and where it chose to lean.
Okay.
I
personally haven't seen number 2 yet. I've only seen 1. I liked 1 quite a bit, but I know the liberties mostly come in number 2, so I don't know what those are.
I like how it's pivoting, where they're definitely questioning like the religious aspect, which I kind of I teach at a Catholic high school, but I do appreciate like the challenging of the institution and the hero not necessarily accepting the fact that he is who everyone thinks he is. Like, I thought that was cool.
I feel like that's just them maybe jumping ahead, like kind of taking where the story goes, but putting it earlier on before you knew that's where the story was going. Or maybe I just always, I'm an atheist pretty much lifelong. And so when I read the Dune books originally, that was my I thought that's what the books were doing all along, was like, oh, he's a fabricated Messiah. You know, it's like, this is something that they plotted to create and give to the world to move their plans in that direction. And he makes his own decisions from there. But it's like, this was still like, that's the point, is like, messiahs and religion can be used to control populations.
Don't give it all away, Dave.
I know.
Jeez.
I don't think it does. I think these are sort of like the broad umbrella.
I know, I'm joking.
Concepts.
Right. So like, I missed that, you know, from the 1984 movie, from reading the books, like that, I missed that for what, like
1984 movie.
I understood the
Bene Gesserit
and everything they were doing, but like
the 84 movie doesn't have a whole lot of that.
No, but I freaking love that.
But
movie.
I will say there was
it is.
Sci-fi,
it's fantastic. It's wonderful.
Oh yeah, there was I think it was a Sci-Fi Network.
Yeah, the miniseries, right?
Watching that in real time, I loved it. I mean,
it looked cool.
I loved it. I watched it again recently about a year ago, and holy shit, it does not hold up.
Well, that was like 90s or early 00s, and doing lots of special effects, it was that era where TV special effects were at an all-time. None of this is going to age well, guys. Like 5 years from now, this is.
It was right when sci-fi had gotten into original content. Like,
yes. Yeah.
But in terms of I mean, you name, you know, a trashy sci-fi movie that came out in my lifetime, I saw it. I'm in the bag for it. So any version. It's only been recently that I've been, you know, seeking out like smarter sci-fi, if you will.
Yeah.
Like most of it is like sci-fi horror, or, you know, I don't know what you would call it, sci-fi action. But yeah, it's always like, you know, if you grew up with Star Wars, you know, whether you consider that science fiction or just fantasy, like we don't have to argue genres, but like, you know, that imprints on you. And then anytime you see something in space, like you're like, yes, like give it to me. So I've consumed a ton of sci-fi, a ton of fantasy. Like, you know,
I mean, it shows you definitely are a fan. Yeah, I think you're very adept at the storytelling that's required around, you know, these sort of mixes of genre. And I have to keep going back to the fact that you kind of onboarding into this world is so seamless and so smooth, and you drop the audience right into the action, and there's no real lag. And it seems like you took that original note from those reviewers to heart and really baked it and and answered that question. So fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also think that you know, one of those things where whenever there's a one and done story that feels like it did exactly what it was supposed to do, like The Short did, where it's like, this is what we're here for. Here's this very poignant, for better or for worse, ending. and you're like, oh God. And then you walk away, and then it's like, and now we're gonna do a sequel, and you're like, sequel to what? What are you gonna do with that story?
Right.
And but there's always a way, right? And then I do think you picked the exact right thing, internally, because the moment I looked at the cover of issue number 1, the expanded, story, I knew exactly who that character was.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I looked at the cover and I was like, oh, a son of a bitch. Yeah, that's a great idea. Like that's exactly what you do with it.
Right.
So yeah, I think
it's just a natural evolution, you would think, right? It's not the next day. Like you've got to build space and then tell us, because I'm shifting genres a little bit, so it's not sci-fi horror anymore. Like we're now sci-fi action, so it's it's different. So
there's that conquest sort of colonization adjacent aspect to this that definitely presents a different ideology idea
too, right?
So
the Dune influence of going to a planet to strip mine its resources, whether it's aliens, whether it's Dune, like those, that is how it makes sense, because that's the world we still live in today for the most part. It's the world we just came from. And so when sci-fi is always just exploring who we are, what we've done, and what we might do in the near future, and how best to go about it, in very larger than life, multi-planet, multi-galaxy, or a whole galaxy kind of way. On the subject of that though, so you're amazing at the mechs that you put together as well. Were you really like a mecha fan, or is that something, or was that just something you're like, it's what the story needs, and then you just got really freaking good at it?
So I really liked Macross when I was a kid.
Yeah.
So Robotech was kind of like this exotic thing that I couldn't access. Like it would be on, I think it would come on at like 6:30 in the morning. So my mother would get me up for school at like 6:45. So I'd be eating my cereal, and I always catch like the last 8 minutes of it every morning. And I never quite knew what was going on. And that's probably all I needed, because that's when the jets transformed, and like the missiles. Like every time I draw a missile in this, I am thinking of Robotech, like the missile and
Robotech.
So that is all, like that is every time I draw. Like that's why they shoot missiles, is because I've got to draw those trails curling and that sense of movement. So, but really, I'm not like a tech drawer. Like part of this is like an exercise on teaching myself how to draw machines.
You're doing
so
good, man.
Like some kids,
I'm shocked you're not.
No, it's not natural. So I have to work very hard, and I feel like it's evolving. So I feel like by issue 3, shit's gonna look super tight. Like I'm gonna figure it out. It's like drawing horses. Like it's hard. Like if you don't draw a lot of horses, like you don't know where anything's bending.
One other thing that sorry, go ahead, finish there, Kyle.
No, go ahead.
One other thing that kept popping into my head were these sort of weird parallels to Full Metal Alchemist, and that kind of soul inhabitant kind of parallel. And I'm not a huge fan of Full Metal Alchemist, but my partner is a super fan and annoys the hell out of me. But I have to say, go for it. You are?
Yeah.
Oh. Another reason to hate you. No.
Yes.
But
this is why he keeps fleeing to the East Coast.
That's right. That's true. But I will say it is there's something very pleasing about the way you present this concept of this father being the ultimate child safety guard. He really is the ultimate child safety fence. Every time this character finds herself remotely in any situation where she may, fall on some, hard time, he's there, and it's fantastic. It's beautiful. I think it's the embodiment of every father's wish, to be that sort of child safety guard. And to that effect, you said you had a daughter at the time when you were creating this. Has she or the children seen the property, reviewed it? What's their connection to it?
She's seen me draw it. So she's 13 now. So she
Oh,
is,
wow.
you know, between the, you know, the age, she was probably 4 when I started it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The short stories. So you know, she's 13. She's seen the drawing. She's seen the cover. She knows it is, you know,
Daddy's story about me.
A little bit, you know, and you know, part of it ties in, you know, it also connects to my wife's father was, you know, lifelong military. So like pulling in, so like she sees a little bit of her dad in it, you know, I see me, I see my daughter, I see what our relationship is and what it could be and what it should be, like all of these things. And I'm just pulling on different strings as they connect to my family. To tell that core story, and then try to build a bigger world where there's greater conflicts and there are other things impeding that relationship as well, or what will ultimately bring them hopefully together.
Hopefully.
I like that your wife sees like, you know, the military man and now like very, very military machine, and she's like, no, that's not you, that's my dad. Sorry.
Right. Well, it is. Yeah. Yeah. The art teacher, not so much.
Right. She's like, no, honey. Pat.
Right.
Nice try. Awesome. Yeah, and I will say, just to jump back, I did want to mention how much of a fan I am. I totally feel for you on those last 8 minutes of Macross before you went to school, but how much that stuck with you because of that, because it was Thundercats that I always caught the last like 10 minutes of for me.
Same.
And I became a Thundercat freak for no particularly good reason. It's not a great show. It's just not. I mean, the designs are great, but they look rad.
Good character design goes a long way.
Yes, but you know what? Those five, because I'm the same way, Dave. It was the final 8 or 10 minutes of that show that I caught, and inevitably, it was the villain Mumra, who was sort of the central figure of the last act, and that's the character I identified with.
It was like, I just thought he was one of the most badass looking villains ever. I was like, that is how you do a villain.
Yeah, it's like my parents were
shit. That is a villain.
You know, in my mind, I was the love child of Panthro, Lion-O, and Shutara. That, you know, somehow that happened, but I had the spirit of Mumra. So
yes, but you know, I will say, just to throw out before, and we're gonna go take a look at the Kickstarter page here in just a moment, so we can get to that. But just to shout out for everyone watching, it is such. Remember, if you're old enough, if you're of any of us three's generation, and you grew up on network television. Or even cable to some degree, where it's like when you flipped on a channel, you had to watch whatever was playing.
And
you might have had a TV guide, and you might have been like, I'm not turning that to that channel until it's the beginning of something. But most of the time, you were flipping to something, and you were in media res every single time. You were just bam, wherever that thing was, is where you're like, what even? And if you were a kid, you weren't reading TV Guide. You were just like, what is this thing? Whatever this movie is. It could have been the network safe edition of Die Hard. And it was just like, or Gremlins or whatever. But it was just, you just started watching. You didn't know if it was 10 minutes to the end or 10 minutes in. You just started watching it. And simpler
time.
But so many things became my favorite things, because when that happens, your brain has to fill in so many blanks. Everything is so much more intriguing than it actually is, because they actually did lay it all out for you. You just weren't there for it. So you're desperately trying to put the pieces together. And I can't tell you what an amazing experience that is as a reader viewer. I love that experience, and we've lost it.
And to drive that home, it's the reason, this is not a plug unless they want to sponsor us, is the reason I love Pluto TV. It's because when you go to Pluto TV, it's basically a sort of clearinghouse for your favorite channels from the past. And whatever is on,
the same. I also got to shout out Tubi with Pluto
and
as well.
It's a constant sort of rotation, and whatever you pop into, and you know, it's like being in 1991 all over again.
Right.
Because God forbid we live in the present.
Right. Well, and these days, you know, people get upset when it's like, I have to watch every Marvel thing. And I'm like, no, you freaking don't. And they're like, but then I don't know what they were referring to in this one line. And I'm like, holy cow, guys, like, just go. It doesn't matter. Just like go with it. See what happens. See what you think of it, even if you don't know. It's a wonderful thing. I feel like we should embrace the uncertainty of fiction again and just dive into a world and like find our sea legs, because that is how we used to have to do it all in comics, especially. There were no I mean, there were comic shops, but you couldn't find like back issues were not the easiest thing to track down. You most of the time just you were getting them off spinner racks when you were a kid, and it was whatever issue it was.
Right.
And
I think I started with issue 218. Warlord 218.
Right.
All right, let's go. Like,
right. And it was just like, this character is cool.
We'll figure it out over the next
cool.
decade.
The setting is cool. Yeah. And you just dove right in. And that is I mean, of course we grew up that way. So of course we think it's the best thing ever. Right. But I will say, I do think if you've never tried it, or it's been a long time, or try it without thinking it's that you're pissed off about it. Like, just go in and see what you like. Just watch the thing until the end. If it's in the middle of something, turn on an episode of a TV show that's in the middle of whatever. Like, all of season 1 is missing. Who cares? Start on see what happens. It's
sorry you got.
I know it's weird.
Sorry you got caught up in our nostalgic diatribe here, Kyle.
No, are you kidding? I'm here for it. That's what I hope would be half the interview, would just be us talking about cool stuff. Because now I just remembered my favorite science fiction show was Farscape, and I can't believe that didn't jump into mind. Like, dear
I
Lord.
never really watched Farscape.
I got into that after years later. Yeah.
Oh, crap.
For me, it was Red Dwarf, which was an old.
Okay. See, I tried that. Like,
that was before
the European brid. Like, I have difficulty
with that.
It was on for like 19 seasons or something. It's just fantastic.
Oh yeah,
that was fantastic.
For me, like, I did do Babylon 5. That was sort of my version of Farscape, but I didn't. I thought Babylon 5 was only okay, which I think is probably why I didn't check out Farscape. I did like Stargate, though. I will say
Stargate
that
was solid.
TV show. I love the movie, so I did actually bother with that. But yeah.
And see,
one day I'll have to.
There was an underwater series, Sequest DSV. I think it was a seasons or something. Yeah,
with poor child actor guy, right?
Who died? That's right.
Yeah, Jonathan Brandis.
Brandis.
Yes,
that's right.
Yeah.
Wow, we're old. These shows have been on television 20 years.
I know. They better have Roy Schneider in
it. Oh yes. Wow, and you don't think what a get that was until you think back to it, and you're like Jaws guy was like in that. Right. That it's like really, wow, man.
Yeah, it was like Lauren Green being in Battlestar Galactica back in that guy was he was on TV forever, and now he's like wearing a silly outfit and sitting in a chair.
So take us real back. You mentioned. Friday. Did you mention Friday the 13th, or did I make that up? Tales from the Crypt.
You made that
up. Yeah.
Oh,
Tales from
you didn't.
The Crypt.
Okay. Tales from the Crypt. Okay, there we go.
Yeah. What was your early connection to that? Like, what was?
Well, I feel like when it became an HBO series, somewhere in the mid 80s, like it was like Sunday nights, Tales from the Crypt would come on. And then also there was a show called Tales from the Dark Side.
Mm-hmm.
Tales from the Dark Side. Yes.
And like
they made a movie of Tales from the Dark Side too. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Like they all. So like those were really prominent, and they were, Tales from the Crypt wasn't really that scary, but Tales from the Dark Side was like, those were like scary to me when I was a kid. So like just that episodic anthology, it's something new every week. Like I really dug that, and then like there were all these other permutations that came after, like you said, like Friday the 13th got a series. Freddy's.
I think Eerie also was a series, right? Eerie.
I don't know. If it was, I didn't watch it, but I watched.
I think that was more of a comedy thing, Eerie, Indiana, or something like that. Right? That
was it?
That was not a straight up comedy.
Dark comedy. I think it was a dark comedy.
Yeah, dark comedy, like a weird show, like Twin Peaksy, but comedic, not Lynchian, super serious art house. Yeah.
So all of those were coming on while I was really getting into like Stephen King novels, because that was like my bridge. So from comics, I moved into Stephen King novels, and so there was like a very passionate 3-year affair with Stephen King novels and
okay, let's get into
it.
So let's get into Stephen King. What are you ranking? What's your ranking here? Are we short story Stephen King, or are we?
Well, there are short stories that still, like you just saying it, the short story, and I don't know what it's called, but it's the one where the guy gets marooned on an island and it's his diary.
Brilliant.
And
brilliant.
And it's called... ending with him. He's basically eating himself, like sections of it. Holy shit. So like that's clearly sticks with me.
It's amazing because Stephen King actually ranks that story as his best.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So Survivor type.
That's it.
Yeah. So like that one jumped when you said short story, like that one jumped to the forefront. But like one of the so I really like The Talisman. So that was the one that he co-wrote with Peter Straub.
Yeah.
And they ended up doing a sequel some 20 years later. So like learning that, like I came late to the party on the second book, but I was super psyched. So I jumped right in on that. So I liked some of the Divergent ones, so like I'm trying to which ones, like I want to do like a deep cut or pull something that isn't obvious.
Hey, but this is a place to do a deep cut.
I know. I'm trying to think.
And I will say, while you're thinking, as like I love King to pieces, but Peter Straub is my Stephen King. Like I do prefer him over Stephen King, and I totally get it. They're very different voices. They're very different prose stylists and whatnot. But King is what I'm. How to put it? Like King tells the better. I do think King tells the better narrative than Peter Straub does. But Peter Straub, to me, has the better prose without sacrificing too much on the narrative side. And it's just the sweet spot for me. Whereas King is a little too, like, he's all story and character. And, like, the prose is functional. It's like it gets you to where you're going. And I know I appreciate that. But, yeah, Straub just gives me more, I think, in that regard.
Right. So I never liked Stephen King's dialogue, but I always liked the stories. Like I always struggled, which is kind of why I like Joe Hill so much. His son, seems to be like the perfect pull, like where he's got like the right elements of his dad, but then he kind of polished off and smoothed out the dialogue. And so I really like Joe Hill a lot. Yeah. Like I really like I think I've read 3 of his novels in the past year. And by read, I mean listen to, because I'm strictly audio. Every time I pick up a book, I'm like, I really should be drawing.
No one means read when they say read anymore.
So I always feel compelled to be drawing, but when I'm in my car, when I'm on a hike or on a treadmill or walking the dog, like I'm always like,
what are you doing? I'm reading.
Right.
Right.
But definitely I'm thinking Misery, Carrie was really great. There were some books that the first book I read by him was the Tommyknockers, because I was getting on a plane from Philadelphia to LA and I'm like, I need something to occupy, a 6-hour flight. And I'm like, this is thick. I've heard of Stephen King. So that was my first Stephen King novel. And then from there, I pretty much went backwards and read everything that he ever did. So I'm trying to think,
so you got into King from the Tommyknockers? Good job.
Right. It was a long flight, but I consumed it all there and back. So
I mean, at least there was nowhere to go but up from there. So, it's like you were just going to get more impressed with him.
Right. So, but it captured enough of my imagination. It was weird enough, it was kind of it had some body horror elements.
I will give it that. Yeah.
It's a great start. Great first step.
So yeah, it's super weird. If you can, it's I don't know, like watching Videodrome or, something like that. And you're like, if you can like this, there's so much more here. Just wait and see. Yeah. So yeah, I can't, I'm having difficulty. I could have prepared. I could have had the whole list and I've been like,
it wouldn't be a conversational interview.
I know.
Right. Well, and that's the joy. What pops to mind? What is currently sticking in your head? And that's fair game. If it's only 1 or 2 things, it's interesting. Well, those are the 2 that are currently sticking with you. Yeah.
but I did go through them all, and especially everything that because I had seen the movies, most of the movies before. So like Carrie and Christine, The Shining, like those movies I had seen before. So reading The Shining and it being totally different kind of messed with me. So I don't like the novel. Like that doesn't.
Oh, interesting.
You mentioned
I like them both, but I was surprised how different it was.
Yeah.
You mentioned Christine, and I started writing this script a while ago, and I'm actually having to polish it off now about this, basically a satanic hearse, and as this sort of doorway to hell kind of situation, and I could not for the life of me come up with like some sort of research material to read after, because I never read anything associated with something I'm writing at the time. I always read it after I do the a draft, and I couldn't for the life of me come up with anything. And the day I finished the draft, it was like Christine, and then 15 other like mechanical horror, satanic, supernatural kind of things. So on my list of things to read next is Christine. Unfortunately, I saw the movie first, so we'll see how that goes.
All right.
I'll have to, there's a short film that just hit Dallas. It's done a couple festivals. I saw it at the Los Feliz Festival here in LA back in October last year. And I think it might be online now. I'm gonna go find it because they've been on podcasts recently, and I feel like that's because it's available somewhere now.
Okay.
And it is a demonic car possession short film that is all based. It's like a lady mechanic who gets pulled into the car, and it's basically a giant rape metaphor and like fighting her way free. But it's the visual effect, and it's directed by a woman, starring a woman. Like it's all their like attempt to do it, but it's visually and like the sound design on it, like it's visceral, it's stunning. Cool. It's like 10 minutes of just like you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
So I'll point that one out to you too, because that one affected me hugely. That was a good one.
Do you guys have King favorite books then? So
I mean, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, go down.
For me, honestly, his entire canon for me is top notch. Is going to be that short story. It blew my mind when I first read it. I had to read it like 4 times to make sense that I was having the reaction, because I never respond to things the way I responded to that. It gave me the sort of same feeling I had, weirdly, and they're so not associated, but the same feeling I had when I first read Lord of the Flies as a like 10-year-old. It was sort of one of the few times I could imagine myself in the placement of a novel or of a story, and because generally my mind doesn't go there. It's very sort of God, silently judging the tale. And for that one, it was just sort of like, oh shit, I get this, I feel this. So
interesting.
I
don't know what it says, that is the character. Those are the characters, Lord of the Flies and this guy, that you're like, this is me, I'm in the tale. And I'm like, okay, Dallas, we have to have a talk. Oh man. So
and there was
for me.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Go. No,
you, because I've talked already. Like, I want to hear you.
That's why you're here, Kyle. What are you talking about?
I know.
No, I just thought of the one where it was, and again, I don't remember names. It was the competition where everyone they're walking, and they have to walk, and they have to stay over, like 4.5 miles an hour. It's basically Squid Game.
Squid Games,
35 years,
it is.
40.
Isn't it like the longest mile or the
the hardest mile or something like that?
Okay, right, and you just got to keep walking, and you get basically blown away.
I tell you, he's so much stronger in short form for me than he is in novel form.
Right.
Right.
I have to
say,
although if you're watching Stephen King, you're great, and
we love you.
I have a couple of scripts you should probably read.
Of course. So yeah, I mean, his short stories are amazing. Like they always stick with you and whatnot. I'm just such a long form person. Like I'm always more impressed when someone pulls off long form than short form. Even though I should be more impressed with short form because that's what I struggle with. So it's like I should like care more about that, but I totally don't. I'm totally selfish, and I'm like, no. The thing that I just like long form. It's what I do. So I think for me, his pinnacle is It. I just that novel blew me away. The fact that he does so much between and the way he weaves the past and the present and the way it ties together at the end, because it just comes to this climax that is both weird, horrific, memorable, and just ticks every box is ticked, everything is tied up, but in a way you aren't expecting. And I think so for me, that is his like the epic. Like I actually don't like The Stand very much. That's sort of his long epic that I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's good, but good is all I'm going to give it. It is sort of the one that blew me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think besides that, I mean, I love The Talisman and Bleak House. Not Bleak House, sorry, Black House. I think it is. And I love the two of them because like Talisman feels more like King than Straub, and Black House feels more like Straub than King. And I do like that they did one then the other and really far apart from each other, and they're nothing like each other, which I really appreciated that. Yet they are, I mean, talk about a similar thing to your short story and your first issue, where you know where it leaves off, it then just like jumps way in time and does something completely different. And it is a continuation and it is an expansion, but it's like we are exploring this in a totally different way with adult characters that are going through their own kinds of personal demons.
And way to pull it back, Dave.
Yeah.
I've trained him well.
So that duology and that, I think that jump, and I think it's one of the reasons why I liked this jump as well, that type of, you know, sticking in the same universe. And I feel like his Dark Tower novels are somewhat similar. They're not quite as extreme in jumps. But in the way they evolve as they go. And the final ones are all very much of a piece, but like from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, it's like they're just like you're reading a different series each time. And then he finally wraps it up. And the Dark Tower is also for long form storytelling. I'm very impressed that and I'm so happy he bloody finished it, unlike, you know, Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, all these other things that'll never be finished until they're dead. And then someone else will come in and he left behind an outline. Sure, he did, but we get an ending. Right. So I'm very happy that he finished it. I'm perfectly happy and satisfied with the ending. I think he set himself up in the Dark Tower. It was like just too... like our imaginations of what a possible ending could be were forever going to be better than any real ending could ever be, which is one of the problems of waiting so long. And I think Game of Thrones, if he does finish it, it will suffer the same thing where it's like we were teased for too damn long. Whatever you do now
is far too high. The expectations,
it's just going to be an ending, and it will be fine. Hopefully, you'll do it well. But no one's going to think it's amazing anymore. You needed to have pumped that shit out, man, quicker than you did. And especially, I feel like he missed his... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, I feel like Martin missed his opportunity because after the shit show of ending the TV show, where, you know, no one was happy with the ending, I was like, within a year or two of that show ending, we all would have accepted whatever he had done as brilliant because it would have been better. And he just kept waffling on it, and I'm like, okay, now our imaginations are better. Now the myth
don't do that, Kyle.
Whatever the reality is. Yeah,
right.
Don't do that. Speaking of that, before we get to the actual page here, I'm sorry, Dave. Did you finish?
No, you keep talking.
Okay, he's got more stuff.
I'm thinking if there's anything else I want to mention right before we jump to Kickstarter, but you keep talking.
So before we do jump to Kickstarter, Kyle, how far out have you plotted this world? Do you know where we're going? How far you are? How far
so
are you?
In my head, it's going to be 4 issues.
Okay.
So I feel like I can stick the landing and, you know, keep it tight and make it good.
Right.
4 issues. If I have to, I think I can cut it to 3, but I don't want to. So I want it to be 4. It could have been 5 if I would have stopped like where the text ends for you guys. Like if I would have put that and built 4 more pages inside of it and made it a 28, like that could have been issue 1.
Okay.
But I didn't. I pushed it like that could have been 2 issues with more world building, but I decided like I needed to get us where I got us in that first issue for people to buy in.
Right.
So 4 issues, that's my plan. That's my rough outline, and hopefully it comes
and then we jump forward and tell the story of her great grandchild, right? I'm
we'll see. Right. Who knows?
Yeah, then she has to be in the mech and have a kid, and like see what it's like.
Right.
And then you pass the reins to your daughter, who by that time
the coming of age and like dealing with your own kids and getting your just desserts because now you know what it's like, and so on and so forth. Yeah, all that fun stuff. So yeah, the only thing I'm going to say, we're going to jump to Kickstarter right after I say this, but I will also say not a book, but I don't care what anyone says. Maximum Overdrive, brilliant. I know he was a coked up crazy man when he was making that film.
Completely.
So much so.
But I love it.
Every frame shows it. Every frame shows it.
Right.
It's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. So yeah, let's pull up the Kickstarter.
All right. Let me share my screen. Here we go. Parent Guardian number 1. An overprotective father, a defiant daughter, an inevitable rebellion. A new sci-fi action series begins with this 32-page first issue. And roughly halfway there was 3 weeks to go. Only 58 backers. Come on, guys. Get it up to 100. Get it up to 100 within the next week. Let's go. Yeah. Oh, and let's play the video before I scroll past it, because it's dumb.
Yeah, we made a video.
Beautiful.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Let's go.
Gorgeous. What did you did you edit that, by the way, Kyle?
I did. So just using my iPad and CapCut and some royalty-free music.
There you go.
We are bare bones.
Keys to the kingdom, for sure. What was real quick as Dave scrolls through here? What was your production timeline like in terms of this issue? What was the?
So I drew the opening splash page, and then it just sat for like 6 months.
Okay.
And as I was marinating on it, and then I ended up redrawing it and adding more people.
Okay.
And then so from that point, I drew the cover, and then it was essentially a page a week. Like that's about my production cycle, where I can kind of carve out 10 to 12 hours a week. So I try, it's like starting on a Sunday and hopefully Friday morning, if not.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to keep myself at that pace throughout.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And initially my plan was to publish this in black and white. So, which is why you see
that. Your black and white is very good.
I can see it. The detail, I can see it.
Because, I wasn't sure, how much I can possibly raise and how much I can go out of my own pocket. So you'll notice a lot of halftones in, especially like the first 12 or 14 pages, which is when my colorist, Michael, he hit me up. So I met him on Twitter. He randomly messaged me and he's like, "Hey, I colored one of your sketches. Is it okay if I post it?" And I looked at him like, dude, that's phenomenal. Like, yes, you can post it. Like you. And I had him do a commission that I was working on like shortly thereafter. And then I was working on the book and I was posting the black and white pages. And like I said, I was going to just go black and white and then wait till I collected either 2 issues or all 4, and then color and do like a hardcover, do something sexy and reprint the original short story with it. Like that was my initial plan. And then he hits me up. He's like, hey, I'm seeing the pages. Do you mind if I just practice on a few?
Oh.
And I'm like,
why would you ever say no?
Thank you, heavens, right?
Practice on them. I'm going to pay you. Like, okay, like we're doing this. So I'm like, all right, I got an extra paycheck coming up. Like I can afford. Like, so I started sending him the pages, and I love his style. I love the textures that are in there. I like the flatter colors, not over rendered. I
will say you're right. That whole, it is real sort of like mid-century, those like halftones, but they're just so sharp. And like if you can go back to that first panel, Dave, with the group scene, like this guy right here, this scene, just fantastic. I mean, look at that. The depth of feet, that's just fantastic.
Oh, it's fun to draw.
But it is true, like this background, this is like old Vertigo type flatter colors, right? For a background where you got like the purple and the orange, but it works. Like I didn't even think about that until you said like, I like the flatter colors. And I was like, oh my God, they are. And my brain didn't think this wasn't modern coloring. It just looks, it works. That is great. I do love all the expressions on everyone's faces. And
they're so cute, so sharp.
Oh my gosh.
Which is so difficult to do.
Just looking at everything and like her expression right there, where it's like everyone else is kind of more like reacting heavily one way or the other to the fight. And she's just like, Jesus fucking Christ.
Which is so difficult to do in such a dense panel. Like, it's a good job.
Yeah. And again, I can see the old school Marvel influence on like how you do action and things like that here, but with also a lot of more modern, like now that you've mentioned, I see the Pander brothers in this. I see, especially from that Grendel series, like, oh gosh. All right. So yeah, folks, if you're looking at this art just along with us, I mean, it's bloody glorious.
Even the sort of, I guess it is an attribution of the sort of halftones, but it does feel slightly off-world. Like it does. Just the color palette alone, it kind of lends itself to that kind of off-world aesthetic. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. And very industrial, like you can see all the steel colors, right? All the metal, all the tones of like of stone, all the different, like they're like mineral colors and iron colors and stone colors, and it's a great color palette for that. But then here's some black and white.
The black and white, even the black, like the shading, this sort of grayscale, just great textures. Yeah.
I mean, so often when black and white is this detailed, it almost screams for coloring to help separate what it is your eye is looking at half the time. And
but it's not necessary in this.
No, these are small, these are shrunken pages, and it's not even necessary. Like I mean, that's just, I've rarely seen that. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and so the short story is a download at every pledge level. So even though I don't think you absolutely need it, it's part of the initial pledge. So you're getting the backstory, you're getting the full story, getting a lot of comic in there.
I mean, I think as you build this world out into the next 30 or 40 issues, yes, that's a request. I think the short story is going to add to the to the enjoyment.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to do that many.
And this is interior art from the short story, folks.
Correct.
Yeah. And then this is a pinup. Print.
That'll be a mini print. So if you back at kind of like the collector's level. You get the print, you get the comics, the original printing, the anthology book, you get a pin. So it's art that I did, 7 years ago. Yeah, that's gorgeous.
Hold on, this alone.
Hold on.
This alone. This is a problem. That is just, it's so referential, but it's also so sort of forward thinking. I mean, I get all the references, the homage. You get this sort of, she even has this weird Bond girl sort of texture to her. It's just good time. It's just a good time.
Yeah. So that artist is Todd Skull. So if you find him on Instagram, like he does essentially like fake movie posters, and they're all like vintage Hong Kong style. So it's like,
love it.
Like he just combines crazy stuff. And so when I saw him again, it's like, I'm bookmarking him. I'm like, oh man, like this would look phenomenal.
What was his name again?
Todd Skull.
Todd Skull.
So at Todd Skull. And
right here.
Yeah, it's just super cool.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Like I love the aesthetic. I like the idea that, especially like when movie posters are made kind of before the movie's done and they don't really know what's in it. So I only gave him a picture of the girl. I'm like I want weird tech. I want planned to make it spacey and exciting, because I don't want it to try to be copying anything that I actually did, because I like that aesthetic. It's like, that scene's not in the movie. Like, what's that? Like, I just think that's cool when you know the story, but then you have something that's kind of, just slightly doesn't marry exactly, but separation. Super cool.
Yeah. That's just beautiful. Yeah. So Todd Skull, if you're out there, I may be contacting you.
No, I will definitely be following him, because that is an art style to bookmark. I totally agree that is you never know.
And good find, Kyle. Because you're right.
Yeah, I'm always.
And I will say, to your point, seeing the art in the actual original mini, and then this series, this issue, that fits and works so well with the aesthetic you're furthering here in the piece. So good job. Good job. Good find.
And custom and original art pledges, you can get a 7x10.5 commissioned art, drawn and inked. You can see some samples right here. Nightwing, I think that's Red Sonja. Over here,
it's an original character from it's a character that who the guy who commissioned it, he gave me parameters, so it's no one we would know.
Gotcha. Same character for this one, or is this
that's a friend of mine's daughter. So she's really into engineering and wants to work for NASA when she grows up. So I did a portrait of her.
That's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, the commissions are sold out, but I think I'll be opening up 4 more slots as we get a little bit further in.
That's big. The commissions are sold out.
I can see why the commissions would. I mean, look at them. I can see why it would sell out like right away. I mean, man.
Art from the book.
That cover even works in black and white, honestly.
It looks, I've already printed it out. It looks fantastic. So, I work digitally. So these would be one-off prints, basically mono prints or artist proof prints. But, I have a certificate of authenticity. I'm only printing one of each. It's kind of like where we're headed in terms of art in comics. Like it's just too difficult, at the very most, like you'll never get a contemporary piece of art where the penciler penciled on the same piece of paper as the inker inked on it. Like that, those days are pretty much long gone. At best, you would get pencils only, or you would get inks over blue lines. And even then, a lot of inkers are switching to digital, and so are a lot of pencilers. It's just, in terms of production, you can just be so much faster and you can be so much better. Like I see mistakes after the fact where I'm like, whoa, like that eye is not lined up right. Or that's, you know, and it's like 12 seconds and I just circle it, scale it, blend it back in. And it's like, otherwise that's locked in forever. Like I would never go back and redraw a page if I was inking. So my work's better. I work faster. The paper that I print on is phenomenal. So I know it's hard to look at it as original art, but it is. It's all that's going to be produced of it physically. So, and this is kind of where we're headed. So, you know, people buy prints, but this would be a one-off print. So,
right. Extreme, we'll as limited as a print gets. So,
yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's you know, I'm testing it out. Like, typically I would blue line the covers or a couple of like really good pages and I would ink those by hand and then scan them back in for the book. But this time I didn't do that. So maybe I'll end up regretting it if like no one bites on these and maybe I'll pivot for the next book and do that. But you know, that's investing another 10 or 12 hours of work on some of these covers. So we'll see, you know, we'll see. But it's there, it's available, it's very reasonable.
It's a good idea. I hope you do get some bites. Yeah. You know, like any new thing, you might only get a few bites this time around, but it's like, you know, ease people into it and hopefully it will be the new thing going forward. I hope. All right. Production schedule. So delivery coming in October of this year. So roughly 6-ish months after the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Is what we're looking at. All right.
That's adding plenty of time to pad things. My guess is we'd be done in August. Like my guess is it'll be ready by August, but we're just, you know, under promising, over deliver. I'd rather have people be super psyched in August than super pissed in October.
Right. All right. And as you can see, it's just Kyle and Michael is the colorist.
Yes.
So that is the team.
That is us.
All right. Anything else you wanted to mention about the campaign here that we have not?
Pretty much it.
Pretty much it.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So
love this.
Once again,
if people are interested, they should definitely check it out. It's fully drawn. It's ready to be colored, and it's a good story. It's a good book.
Yeah, it's great. It is. It is a great story. You just looked at the art, so it was a great book. And that is only until April 26th. You can see that the little ticker banner scrolling at the bottom. I will also put a link here to the Kickstarter in the comments for anyone who wants to click that directly. Just go right to it. And all right, we are at the wine pairing time.
I'm excited for this. I'm ready to take notes.
So your turn to go first, Mr. D.
I think it is. All right. So first, let's start with the glowing review of this property. First of all, it takes a lot for someone to get me to enjoy the mech milieu. I am a person who has zero interest in mech, and this is coming from a person who's done multiple mech video games. It just is not my thing, but
I'm not gonna lie, mine either.
Right? I mean, it just does nothing for me, with the one exception of what's the big mech movie that came out like 5 years ago?
Pacific Rim?
Yeah, that one, because it was just mindless stupidity. It was so stupid. Not even like it intellectually or artistically. It was just the spectacle. I was like, oh wow, they really made this.
I mean, it's just a kaiju movie with mechs.
It's just kaiju, and it's because of the kaiju that I liked the movie. Let's be honest, I'm a kaiju freak, even bad kaiju. Anyhow, one, you made me enjoy the presence of the mech, because you've taken the mech, which is this wonderfully sort of monolithic, sort of unemotional, detached concept, and you've imbued it with this sort of paternal kind of love and care and it is the personification. I keep going back to this. It's the personification of the child safety lock, and it's just that taken to an extreme, and it's kind of fantastic. I want to see how she works around. I want to see, how these characters kind of resolve this in the greater world, that they're sort of, in this sort of conquest, colonization kind of parallel you've created, off-world parallel. And so when I do these pairings, I either choose a wine that I want to enjoy as a character in the world. And again, my one stipulation is I don't get involved when I'm in the world. I am the Where's Waldo who's standing in the background watching everyone die. I'm not going to press a button. I'm not going to perform the Heimlich. I'm sifting, sniffing my wine and enjoying the mayhem. Or the beverage I would enjoy as I'm actively reading on the couch. And for me, it was the beverage I would want to enjoy reading on the couch. I needed something that was really complex, but also really accessible. I know that seems a little contradictory, but and I knew I wanted it to be a singular vintage, and I decided on one of the more complex grapes in my mind, the Pinot Noir, or Pinot, and I've actually used this particular winery's creations, for lack of a better term, because they are creations, in a previous pairing. So I went with a timber winery, which is a Northern California vineyard, and they do great sort of blends. I'm actually drinking the 2014 Timber Super Group Pinot Noir.
Wait. Hold that. Let me make you bigger. Hold that up and try and get the light a little bit better there.
Oh, it's not going to work.
It's blowing out. We can't read anything.
But it's the Timber Super Group 2014 that I'm drinking tonight. I previously used the 2019 Super Group Pinot Noir, but they are completely different. In terms of what's going on in the bottle here on the glass, this particular vintage is sort of medium boldness, medium tannic structure. It's a little drier and high acidity, and because of that, it really does open up on the palate over time. And I think a lot like your property here does. I'm so invested because I read that first mini intro. I'm already invested in the relationship between the father and the daughter, and that is the core of this world, even though it expands and goes other places. I think I keep coming back to that, and I think most other people will too, even without reading the initial short. So for me, I wanted something that had this complexity that opened up over time. On the palate, you get lots of oak and caramel. You even get some weird smoke and a little garlicky pasta thing on the back end. And I imagine if I'm in this sort of off-world place where we're invested in this corporate kind of resource gathering experience, I'm probably gonna want and desire some comforts of home, some sort of delicacies, and in this bottle, you really do kind of get those notes. It kind of gives you fig, it gives you smoke, it gives you a little sweet, it gives you a little of a jammy thing, and it's kind of a full, for lack of a better term, culinary kind of experience that I think I Yeah, that's my go. That's my guy. It's the Timber 2014 Pinot Noir Supergroup.
All right, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Were you going for when you were talking about all the culinary stuff, like, in all those sci-fi movies when they're on one of the, like a starship or on one of the, like they always have like one of those, like you eat the tablet and it's all your like all 3 courses in one tablet and you
exactly
just, munch it and swallow. Okay, yeah.
Exactly. It's precisely
kind of
it. You get that in the bottle and and on the glass.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, that's
all right. So I went with a weird one today.
Usually I'm the guy who goes with a weird one.
I know. I'm going to reveal it right away and then explain it, because there's not really a point in holding back. There won't be much of a reveal. Everyone's going to be like, WTF? What are you even talking about? So, but I did. So I went for, I'm going to expand my little screen here. I went for a Marshall Foch.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
All right. This is a 2018 from Michigan. Marshall Foch is a grape variety. It is a hybrid. And I'm going to I'll even post it in the chat here, everyone, so they can read this right here. This is from a Michigan winery called Thunder Bay. They do lots of odd experiments like this, where they take a grape that is only used a little bit in certain places, but it's not well known. Not too long ago, I'm struggling to remember what I paired it with, but I paired one of the comics we had on with a Saskatoon berry wine that they had played around with. Saskatoon berry being this strange berry that's actually related to apples out of Canada. And someone had accidentally delivered the wrong fruit to them. And they were like, oh, sorry, do you want it for like pennies on the barrel? Because it's going to cost too much to like take away. So they were like, okay. And so they kept it and tried making wine out of it. And they actually managed to make a port, a sweet fortified port out of it that was amazing.
It's very good. Very good.
It's very good. So Marshall Foch, first, let's get the superficial reasons why I paired this with the book out of the way. So not only Marshall Foch, it is the French word for marshal, a rank in their military. It's named after a marshal last name was Foch, who founded this grape and discovered it in the first place. They don't actually know the parentage of the grape. They can only guess on it. They do know one of the parents. They do know that one of the parents is Gold Riesling, which is itself a hybrid of Riesling and Cortellier Musk, another grape called that. But those are both Vitis vinifera. So it's a Gold Riesling with something that is Vitis riparia or Vitis rupestris, which is the Native American. So, table grapes that we eat here in America are that version of grape. So it's a hybrid between those kinds of grapes and the Gold Riesling. And when you do hybrids are becoming more and more popular because of climate change and to be more disease resistant, more climate resistant. But of course, they taste fairly different from your Vitis vinifera. They usually contain, or actually just to dial back a minute, it is also Marshall Foch. I always want to like spell it out. Marshall Foch. It benefits from growing in a cooler and harsher climate. The harshest growing conditions, this thing actually thrives. And I thought, not only is it named after a military rank, it thrives in harsh, growing conditions. Great for interstellar, outer space, colonial areas and whatnot. I'm like, yeah, this is probably what they could make in an environment like that. Even though it would probably be a controlled greenhouse kind of a thing, this thing just thrives. It's not finicky. Now, when you do a hybrid, you get the Native American side of that hybrid always comes with what they always call a foxy or a musky flavor to it and smell. Right. So if you cut open an American table grape and you think of the flavor and the smell of it, what we really call not wine, but grape juice that we just drink as grape juice, there is that weird scent to it. That is always
it's really strong in the muscadines and the sort of those native grapes. Like if you can find a muscadine or a
correct. But some hybrids, it's not too terribly strong, and if you grow it in the right way and vinify it in the right way, you can make it. It's always going to be there. But like everything in wine, there are many things that are considered flaws, but if integrated well, they aren't flaws. You can even think of like that petroleum smell in Riesling that can often, if it's too strong, if it blows out the Riesling, it's not the best Riesling.
Right.
If it's just integrated and there's a hint of petroleum, but it's not all you smell, it can be an amazing Riesling and absolutely delicious and even smell really amazing. Same thing with Pinotage. It has this burnt rubber smell that is often seen as a flaw, but if integrated well, it's also really amazing. Now, Marshall Foch, it can be a very light-bodied wine, but when grown in certain places, and this one is definitely no exception, it can be a darker, just juicier, really luscious version of a red wine. It has a very strong smell, like a Gamay, and Gamay is like a Beaujolais, where it has these. It is definitely, but this is definitely a dark Gamay, so it's got these like blackberry aromas. But then and this is where the hybrid part comes in, those musky smells, when it all blends together, you get this like toasted wheat and mocha and coffee and dark chocolate and vanilla. And it's just, it is like dessert. It smells like a very bittersweet dessert in a glass.
What's the tannic structure like?
Oh, very mild. So the tannic structure is, like medium, like medium low, not even medium high. It's pretty smooth. The acidity is high, which is what cuts through all those dark, unctuous flavors. If anything, this weirdly, I know this is going to bore you to death, Kyle, but this weirdly smells. This weirdly tastes, but Dallas will get this, so I'm going to say it. This kind of tastes like an Amarone.
Really?
Yes. It tastes, and Amarone is a wine from Italy where they partially dehydrate the grapes. They partially raisin them before turning them into wine to concentrate all the flavors. So this has a very concentrated flavor like an Amarone, where it's all these dark fruits and then all these, it's not herbaceous, but all these, the bitter chocolate, the coffee, the toasted grains, like these flavors that come through where it's all just this luscious, there's another word that I'm looking for here that I'm not coming up with this. Luscious isn't quite right, but it's very
decadent.
Decadent, yeah, maybe decadent's it. But like it's got this decadent mouthfeel to it, but then this nice acidity keeps it lively, like it really cuts through. And while it still tastes like a bittersweet dessert, it's not cloying, it's not unctuous. It is sweet on the palate, but not, this is a dry red wine.
Right.
And this is one, they grow a lot of this in Canada. They grow it in Michigan. You can find a little bit of this in like the New York Finger Lakes area, like places where it is cooler climates tends to be where it thrives. And this is something I picked this up the last time my parents are in Michigan. So when I visit them, I go to the wineries there. And this was one that just, it's different. It's very different. And there's so many things. There's so much happening in the glass. It's a blend of grapes and a blend of flavors and styles that you got to chew on it a little bit to really know what it is you're drinking and really know what it is that's happening with this wine. And until I really realized that it really was like an Amarone, I almost didn't have a good reference for it. And then I was like, but I mean, when I first started drinking Amarone, I didn't have a good reference for that either. It was just Amarone. I was like, it tastes like an Amarone. Nothing else is quite like it. But this one now, when I found that, I found my footing with it. And I think with Parent Guardian, the short story and into the main comic, you are blending so many different sci-fi elements. You are, and they're all sci-fi favorites, but you're weaving a story that is not the usual story you tell with these sci-fi elements. You had to get a critic to push you to do the world building. Like it's not like that wasn't the point. Right, exactly. Whereas most of the people, that's like it's like high fantasy. It's like that's why they want to do it, is the world building and the universe building and putting all these pieces together, and then they find the story within all that world building. And you basically like went in bass backwards into this sort of like this type of wide space opera sci-fi world building. And so there was something about this wine, not only in style, because it's deep, it's dark, it's decadent, but then it's got that lift with the acidity that just keeps it light on its feet. And I think with Parent Guardian, like your art style is incredibly decadent. It's very rich. It's very dark, but dark in that rich way. I mean, it's very much a bitter, and of course, the world and the story you're telling is very bittersweet. It ain't happy times for any of these characters, not really. So,
Right.
but it moves. Like you're not weighed down by the story. You don't drag us down with the background of the world. Like this is like that's going to get peppered in. You're going to learn about it because of the things the characters are doing, which is the best way to do it.
Right.
And so this is the wine that just made me feel like it was the right combo of number of things. It had the right final effect. My palate, unlike when I was drinking this, I was just like, yes, I want something this decadent, but not something that is, I didn't want not decadent like a Napa Cab. Yeah, I didn't want it to be that type because that's rough. That's got a harshness to it where I was like, I mean, this is a harsh world, but there is something like I can see your Marvel Comics background and your pulp background and like the things you're bringing into it that is just like it's so playful and so lively, even with the seriousness of the story. That I was like, no, this is not brooding Napa Cab. Like it needs something else. And when I found this, I really think that on a superficial level and on an honest level, I think it just fits everything about Parent Guardian. So, folks, Marshall Foch. I spelled it in the chat there for you. You will not be able to spell it on your own. Trust me. So, Marichal or something like that. But Marshall Foch. Go take a look for that. Kyle, I think you're on the East Coast, right? So
no, I'm in California.
I
grew up on the East Coast. But yeah, I'm in.
You grew up on the East Coast. Okay.
Oh, cool.
Well, if you ever do find one of these, or maybe just look to our neighbor in the north up in Canada, and maybe there's a way to try one from there. This is my first. I've tried. This is my second bottle of it. I've been there. I've been up to Michigan and bought another one when I went back up there. So I was like, this stuff's good. And I can't find it anywhere else. So let me go look for it. So this is an awkward one or an odd one. I don't know how easy it's going to be to find for most people. This is from Thunder Bay Winery in Michigan. You can mail order. They will ship it to California. I do believe they can. Because Michigan technically can't ship to California, but I think they use if you use a middleman, a warehouse, they can do it that way. And I believe this is one winery that does that. So take a look into that, and if not, try Canada. They can get it to you.
That's great.
But that is my pairing. Yeah,
super cool.
And so,
thank you.
As
all right,
always,
Kyle.
Yes.
Yeah, we ask our guests bring on a comic and pair it with something. What do you got?
Very conflicted leading into this, but it just so happened I received a comic in the mail 2 days ago that I thought would be really great to share, and it is called The Feeding by David Boer. So he is an LA writer. I tabled next to him a few years ago and became very friendly with him. He's super into Stephen King. He has his series with IDW called Canto, but he's also been writing some licensed properties. So he did stuff for Boom, I believe, where he wrote for Firefly, Ghostbusters, Dungeons and Dragons. Yep. So he's been doing really great work. His career is really taking off the past few years since I met him. So this coming in the mail, it's a one shot. It was a Zoop exclusive. So Zoop is another one of the crowdfunding sites that it's like kind of bougie, kind of exclusive. Like they're only inviting, like you gotta like know somebody that knows somebody to get invited on that platform. But I think it was for New York Comic Con. They were producing books for that convention specifically, and then you could get your Zoop exclusive. So I this came in the mail. It's a horror story. It's a one shot. It is very much in the vein of Tales from the Crypt, like one of those episodes where we've got our decadent male lead with a sordid past that comes back, to haunt him and consume, like what once consumed him is now trying to consume him again. It's really great. If you can find it online, if you can find a digital copy, I highly recommend it. It was really fun to read, and I really appreciate one shots a lot.
Yes.
You know, like everyone's got a huge story and it's going to be this sweeping epic. And it's like, sometimes you just want,
the cornerstone,
you know, like,
of storytelling.
right?
That's
Like,
right.
give me something I can, you know, finish in a night.
It.
So I really enjoyed it. So I do not have an overly what would you say, sophisticated palate when it comes to
pretentious.
wine.
You can say pretentious.
I do drink wine from time to time, so I'm not totally unfamiliar. We live in Southern California. We have wine tasted all over. So I'm very much like superficial at first. So I'm going to lead with the bottle. So I found this bottle. It's called Opaque Darkness. So just off the bat, like it gave me the vibe that the comic has.
Yeah.
And then it is, I should probably check my notes real quick. So it's a Zin Petite Syrah Petite Verdot blend.
Yes.
Right. 2019.
That is Opaque Darkness. Yes.
Yes.
That is.
It is quite.
Those are
dark.
Some tannins.
Yes, and that's kind of so. When it comes to alcohol, I'd like to know that I'm drinking alcohol. Like some wines are like so they just go down too fast. They're juice.
Yes.
And I find myself consuming way too quickly. So I like something that slows me down a bit.
Exactly.
And this does that. So it's very fruity in the front, right? Like, again, my unsophisticated palate detects like berries really early on. And then the tannins kick in and it kind of strips your mouth of moisture for a second.
Chewing like the sand.
So, which I kind of like with the horror vibe, you know, like it pulls it out. But then there's like a kind of a mellow finish. And then suddenly you get those fruit flavors back again as it just cleanses and like you're ready for another sip. So that's my pairing. I thought it was appropriate and I've been enjoying it. I had a glass before we came on. I didn't want to drink too much too soon. So I've been trying to.
It's a problem when I'm always eyeballing my glass as this keeps going. And I'm like, we're only 20 minutes in. Slow down.
Right. Pace yourself. So that's what that is my pairing for tonight. So hopefully,
Yeah.
I did okay.
Feeding and Opaque.
Opaque and the Feeding by David Boer. Go find that. It was a Zoop exclusive. Do you know if that's available in some?
I'm not sure. I did not do a Google search. I should have done a little bit better show prep. I'm sorry, but I'm sure, like in the age of the internet, you can find anything anywhere these days. So they are out in the wild, or find him at a convention, and I'm sure he has copies that he will happily sell.
100%. All right, everybody. One final time. This has been Kyle Roberts, Parent Guardian #1, now on Kickstarter for another 3 weeks until April 26th. You have until then. As BMD Nerd stated in the comments earlier, that digital tier is a beautifully affordable gateway entry point.
Fire.
Yes. Alt covers fire. And the interior pages don't stop that fire even a little bit. So you gotta check this one out. The short story that started the whole thing comes with every single tier. There's no reason not to do this. I've already backed it. I didn't have to. He'd already sent it to me, but I backed it anyway. So that's always kind of a sign, right? Where it's sort of like it's worth supporting because it's just a great comic. So yeah, if you're watching this either while we're live or if you're watching the recording later or listening to it, as we all do, who reads, who watches, we all just listen these days. So go find it. Go find David Boer's The Feeding as well. That used to be on Zoop, but hopefully you can find it some other way. And this has been the Wine and Comic Pairing Show. I've been Dave. That's been Dallas.
That's Kyle. This is
Thank you guys for having me. This was so much fun.
And we all have drunk too much. Okay.
That's right.
Signing off, folks. We'll see you next time. Next week, we'll be back on Monday. See you then. Have a wonderful weekend.